We are far enough into the season now that you should know in Dynasty whether you are rebuilding, contending, or somewhere in between. So it's really important to be honest with yourself about where you are and lean into that mentality. In this video, I've got 4 trades that you can make as a rebuilding team in Dynasty that are going to help your team compete in the long run. Let's get into it. The first person that I have for you today is a quarterback that you can buy, and it's someone that I wrote up for a recent article for DLF that you can find about 3 underperforming quarterbacks that you should be buying in Dynasty right now. The other 2 were Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Young, who I was tempted by, but I've gone for MccCarthy of the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is obviously a slightly strange suggestion because McCarthy is not going to play at all this season, and Sam Darnold has played really well. But if you've watched any aside from Geno Smith to break out this late into your career, even Baker Mayfield had shown high level play beforehand in Cleveland and for like 2 games in LA as well. Whereas with Sam Darnold on Carolina and in New York, it was basically next to nothing. My theory is that Sam Darnold's play right now is more being elevated by having a top 5 play caller in Kevin O'Connell and some of the best weapons in the NFL. And also, on top of that, an incredible offensive line. We knew when McCarthy was drafted that this was an absolutely incredible situation. So it's not a huge surprise that Sam Darnold's been able to thrive there as well. But if you're the Vikings, you don't draft a first-round quarterback and trade up for him even, and then never start him. There are people saying that they should look to trade McCarthy, which I think is genuinely ridiculous. You don't invest that level of capital in a player and not look to have him be your long-term starter. For Sam Darnold, yes, he's played amazingly this year, and I think he probably ends up finding a home next year as a bridge quarterback. But in 2024, he's currently being paid around $10 million. In 2025, when he's a free agent, he's probably going to get a similar type of deal to Baker Mayfield got in Tampa Bay, which is $100 million over 3 years. Are the Vikings really going to draft a first-round quarterback and then go out and pay another quarterback $33.3 million a year? They do have the cap to do it, around $75 million in cap space for 2025 currently, but I just can't see that they'll actually want to do that. So I'm pretty confident that McCarthy is going to be the starter next year. And if anything, the level of play that we've seen from Darnold should make us more optimistic for McCarthy, who we knew was a project coming out, and taking some time to learn, to be in meetings, to get used to the NFL, even if it's not on the field, I think will be really important for him. So to me, McCarthy is a screaming buy right now. I want to make sure that my content is as actionable as possible. So for each of these 4 players, I've got 4 trade suggestions for you. A player you can offer straight up, a pivot down, and picks. For the straight up player, I think you can look at an existing veteran quarterback, someone like Geno Smith or Kirk Cousins, or even Baker Mayfield, who I've mentioned previously. For the pivot up option, where you're offering a player and something else for my target, potentially someone like Daniel Jones, the people who have McCarthy might want a quarterback they can use right now. And Daniel Jones hasn't been terrible. He was actually a temptation to include in this video, but I prefer JJ. For the pivot down offer, I'd potentially be looking to get McCarthy and something else for Jared Goff. Jared Goff, I'm not hugely convinced on this year. He's not actually a QB 12 at the minute. He's not actually a QB 1. So I'm not hugely convinced by him and his long-term future in the league as that sort of consensus top 10 quarterback. Potentially him and a young wide receiver like AD Mitchell, Jalen Polk, Jermaine Burton would be a nice trade for McCarthy. And then looking at a trade for picks, I think you can get a deal for McCarthy done for 2 seconds right now. I would consider paying a late first because of this year's quarterback class, but I actually don't think you need to pay a first for him right now. I think you can get the deal done for 2 seconds. Next up is the running back position. Now, rebuilding running back buys are really hard because the theory is that that's the position that changes the most frequently, so that when you're rebuilding, that's the position that should be the last that you acquire. So build around young wide receivers and quarterbacks, and then when you think you're ready to compete, add a running back into the mix. But if you are looking towards 2025, my target would be Trey Benson. Now, Benson was actually my RB1 in this class, so I am a little bit biased, but it's been a really disappointing start to the season for him. Currently running, we knew James Conner was going to start off as the workhorse. What we didn't expect was for Emery DeMarcado to be running ahead of Trey Benson in this Cardinals offense, and for James Conner to be seeing an 80% opportunity share, so no Benson at all. Now, he might come good later on in the season, but at the end of the day, the Cardinals did spend a second-round pick on Benson, so they are going to look to use him eventually, even if he's being slowly eased in. The crucial thing here is that James Conner not only is approaching 30, but is a free agent at the end of the season. And the Cardinals don't have a huge amount of cap space to play with. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the plan being James Conner absolute wheels off the rest of this season, and then next season, or towards the end of the season either, start to move over to Benson. He is a great all-round back who's good at a lot of things and not great at any of them, but I think he has a real opportunity to be an RB2, and at the minute, you can buy him for much less than RB2 prices. So he's definitely someone that I'd be targeting in a rebuild. So I said you can buy him for less than RB2 prices. What are those prices? For a straight up deal, I would be looking at someone like DeAndre Swift. There's a lot of running backs in this range, but if you've watched this channel before, and my starts of the week for last week, which was absolutely nailed on for DeAndre Swift, by the way, I said that you should be looking to trade him relatively soon. He's not a hugely talented or efficient running back. He's just performed in 2 smash spots against really bad rush defenses. For the pivot up move, I would be looking at a back maybe like Jerome Ford, that you can add something onto, perhaps a late third, to get up to Trey Benson. Ford still has some value at the minute until Nick Chubb is out, but is going to lose that value relatively soon. In terms of the pivot down, this is one that I'm thinking about, having watched the recent video on the Fantasy Sanctuary with my good friend Rich, where he talked about selling Travis Etienne. Now, Tank Bigsby is someone that I'm really in on, and has been incredibly efficient when you look at the actual underlying metrics. Etienne never has been. And I'm not convinced he's going to have a huge amount of future in the league, even though he probably will play out the rest of his rookie contract, given that he has a 5th-year option because the Jags selected him in the first round under Urban Meyer, which was still insane. But if you can pivot off Etienne for Trey Benson and pick up a second as well, that's something I'd be looking to do. And then in terms of picks, I don't think you need to pay a huge amount for Trey Benson. I think a second would be fine, mid to late. You probably paid a late first, early second for him last year, and he's not done a huge amount. But I still think that second round pick is worth it for Trey Benson at this point in time. If you are enjoying this content and you can't wait to get on and see who the wide receiver and the tight end are that I'm asking you to buy in a rebuild, I would really like to ask you to like this video, leave a comment, and please consider subscribing. It does make a huge difference to the growth of the channel. We are approaching 200 subscribers, which I think is amazing considering it's been less than a month since we started. But I would love if you could be part of that journey and hit that subscribe button down below. But for now, let's get on to the wide receiver that I think you should buy, and it's someone I've spoken about quite a lot before. Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice was in one of my first ever videos where I spoke about 4 underrated wide receivers, and was spot on. He was being drafted way too low, with people being concerned about the suspension issues. He was also in one of my most accurate recent videos where, after his injury, I suggested you should buy Juju Smith-Schuster to replace him. That obviously was correct. He exploded against the Saints on the weekend. But in terms of in Dynasty, Rashee Rice is someone that people haven't really gotten round to yet. He was on pace for wide receiver 3 numbers, a wide receiver 3 season, until he got injured. He should be fine to be back and healthy next season. Now the suspension is still looming, but Rashee Rice is still on his rookie contract. This was only his 2nd year in the league, so he's still incredibly young. He's tied to Patrick Mahomes for a fair chunk of time, even if he doesn't get extended, but I think he probably will, because Travis Kelce will probably be retired by then. Chris Jones will probably be gone by then. There will be some cap space opening up for them to pay Rashee Rice. Now, yes, he's not going to contribute to your team this season, and he may be suspended for part of next season as well. But the connection that we've seen between Rice and Mahomes is something we haven't seen since Tyreek Hill. And I'm not suggesting he is Tyreek Hill, he's a very different player, but he has the potential to be the wide receiver one in Dynasty. He has the potential to be considered up there with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and CeeDee Lamb, but probably Malik Neighbors, we have to say at the minute. But people just aren't quite coming round to it now. If you're rebuilding and you're trying to get your points down to get that number one overall pick, you can do something that I went and did in a league recently where I sold him. I bought Rashee Rice for actually Garrett Wilson, who is someone we're going to come on to in a second. Rashee Rice straight up for Garrett Wilson. That is a trade that I would make 100% of the time. I think Rashee Rice has a better dynasty outlook than Wilson. We were all waiting for him to get an elite quarterback. We thought he got one. He didn't. Aaron Rodgers sucks. And then Aaron Rodgers is probably going to retire either end of this season or end of next. And we're back to the same issue for Garrett Wilson. The talent is there, but Rashee Rice is tied to Patrick Mahomes and has performed way more since he's been in the league. In terms of the pivot up, I would be very happy to do it for Brandon Ayuk. I'm not hugely in on Ayuk, especially around the sort of line that we've been thinking about him recently in his current value. I'd be willing to pay probably a second on top of him for Rashee Rice because I think the ceiling is so much higher. But I don't think you have to. I think Brandon Ayuk is probably seen as equal to Rashee Rice in a lot of dynasty circles. In terms of pivoting down, I think you can get Rashee Rice plus for someone like AJ Brown. I think probably that next tier of wide receiver after the few that I've mentioned earlier. So someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. You can get more on top by selling them for Rashee Rice plus. And then in terms of picks, I would pay genuinely any first for Rashee Rice. I think he's that talented. I would rather have him than Luther Burden, Tet McMillan, Ashton Jeanty, like any of the upcoming rookies, especially in Superflex. So even if you think your first is early, I would rather have Rashee Rice on my dynasty team. So if you can get him for any first, I would be more than happy to go and do it right now. Then the tight end is someone else that I've mentioned before. I did a video earlier in the week where I was looking at smash underrated plays. Theo Johnson was my tight end. I've also got, if you're a DLF subscriber, I've got a deep dive into Theo Johnson coming tomorrow, which is Saturday morning. Theo Johnson is a player that his athletic profile absolutely popped in the pre-draft process. And he was someone that people in dynasty circles were really excited about. And then you get into the season and rookie tight ends don't do anything, and suddenly people aren't interested anymore. So he's actually way down in terms of consensus rankings in sort of the mid-20s range, behind players like K. Dotton, Noah Fant, Hunter Henry's above him, just because he's not doing a huge amount right now, but we would have been surprised to see that be the case. But even though he's not performing that well, in the last matchup, he caught four targets for 4 receptions and just over 50 yards. So he is starting to see the field. But more importantly, he is the established tight end one on the team. Daniel Bellinger is playing less than 20% of snaps, and Theo Johnson is on the field for over 70%. In the last matchup, where obviously Theo Johnson caught all of his targets, Daniel Bellinger didn't even have a target. So Theo Johnson, I think, is going to be the tight end one on the Giants for a while and is performing fine with Daniel Jones. Now, that could change going forward, that he could have a better quarterback. But that athletic profile is something that should not be overlooked. We do not expect tight ends to produce immediately. Not everyone is going to be Sam Laporta, but you can buy him now for so cheap and then stash him for later and wait until you have a top 5 tight end 2-3 years in the future. Then the trades that I would make for Theo Johnson, I mean, these don't feel hugely exciting just because tight ends don't feel hugely exciting. I would trade him straight up for K. Dotton. I think K. Dotton is genuinely not a good football player, so I'd be perfectly happy making that deal. I would pay Colby Parkinson plus. I think you could probably do it straight up, but maybe add some fab on the top and see if that gets done. And then I would trade him plus something for... I'd trade Pat Freiermuth for Theo Johnson plus. I think Pat Freiermuth has a very limited ceiling that Theo Johnson could get past. And in terms of the picks that I'd pay for Theo Johnson, I'd pay an early 3. Again, I think you probably don't need to. I think that sort of mid to late third range probably gets the deal done because he's going very under the radar, even though in the combine process we were all raving about Theo Johnson. So that'll do for today's video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about these 4 players. Let me know if you've made any trades for them recently or if you've sent them away. Or leave a comment or drop me a message on Twitter if you are thinking about paying for these players and want to ask me what trade you should make. I'm always happy to answer any questions. Have a great time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you next time.